Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher who supposedly killed God and preached the rise of the Übermensch, a superior race. A wealthy man surrounded by luxury and women. No, that won't do. The truth is that Friedrich Nietzsche was a Prussian philosopher who began as a man of faith and wanted the best for every individual. Yet he lived a life marked by tragedy, loneliness, illness, and misunderstanding. This is the story of perhaps one of history's most important and misunderstood philosophers and his magnificent mustache. Our story begins in Recken, a small village in Prussia, where Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche was born to Karl and Franziska Nietzsche. He was named after the King of Prussia, whose birthday he shared. Nietzsche grew up in a deeply religious family. His father was a Lutheran pastor, and for a time, family life was peaceful. Nietzsche later gained a sister, Elizabeth, and a younger brother, Ludwig. Then tragedy struck. His father developed a serious brain illness that left him in terrible pain and unable to perform basic tasks. Watching him deteriorate must have been deeply traumatic for 4-year-old Nietzsche. Soon afterward, his father died. Only months later, Nietzsche's younger brother died as well. These losses affected him profoundly. At school, he was often described as unusually serious, emotionally distant, and far too mature for his age. After the deaths, his family moved to Naumburg to live with relatives. Despite everything, Nietzsche worked hard to make his mother proud. He studied Christian theology and attended a religious school. It seemed likely that he would follow in his father's footsteps, especially when he enrolled at the University of Bonn to study theology. But university life did not go well. Nietzsche clashed with his professors, struggled socially, and remained burdened by his childhood trauma and family responsibilities. After 2 semesters, he realized he was deeply unhappy and left. Around this time, Nietzsche began questioning Christianity. When someone is repeatedly knocked down by life, they eventually ask why they should keep getting back up. For a devoted Christian, God might provide the answer, but what happens when God no longer does? Nietzsche could not simply give up on life, so he began searching for another source of meaning. His mother and sister reacted harshly to his decision to abandon theology and question his faith, damaging their relationship. He switched to philology and moved to Leipzig to study ancient languages. His life improved. He made friends, developed good relationships with professors, and excelled academically. But his faith continued to fade until he finally abandoned Christianity. Nietzsche worked passionately and became one of the best students in his field. His talent earned him a position as a professor at the University of Basel at an exceptionally young age. He was reportedly an engaging teacher who valued personal relationships with his students. Unfortunately, his health soon deteriorated. Nietzsche suffered from severe headaches, digestive problems, poor eyesight, and other recurring illnesses, despite trying to continue the work he loved. He was forced to retire at only 34, yet he kept writing. God is dead. For religious readers, this may sound like a triumphant attack on Christianity, but Nietzsche's meaning was more complicated. He believed that scientific progress, the Enlightenment, and growing secularism had weakened Christianity's authority over Western society. Human beings had relied on religion for centuries to provide meaning, morality, and purpose. If belief in God disappeared, those foundations would disappear with it. In that sense, humanity had killed God and now had to face the consequences. Nietzsche was not simply celebrating this event. He was warning that without religion, people could fall into nihilism, the belief that life has no meaning or value. However, he also saw an opportunity. Instead of surrendering to despair, individuals could create their own values, choose their own paths, and become responsible for their own destinies. This idea is explored through Zarathustra, the main character of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. After spending 10 years alone in the mountains, Zarathustra returns to society to share what he has learned. He announces that God is dead and challenges humanity to overcome its old beliefs. People must now confront the difficult task of finding purpose in a world without divine authority. Rather than despairing, Zarathustra urges them to embrace this freedom, reject blind conformity, and become creators of their own values. This leads to Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, The Übermensch is often mistranslated or misunderstood as a biologically superior person or race. Nietzsche was describing an individual who overcomes inherited limitations, refuses to follow values blindly, and consciously creates a meaningful life. His philosophy can be summarized through 7 central recommendations. First, embrace individuality. People should question society's expectations and discover who they truly are. Second, practice self-overcoming. Growth requires continuously challenging your weaknesses, limitations, and assumptions. Third, live passionately. A life devoted to meaningful goals is more valuable than one lived passively. Fourth, embrace suffering and adversity. Hardship is an unavoidable part of life, but it can also make us stronger and more resilient. Fifth, create your own values. Morality should not simply be accepted because it is imposed by religious, political, or social authorities. Individuals must examine their experiences and take responsibility for what they believe. 6. Remain true to yourself. Trust your judgment and recognize that you can be both your greatest ally and your greatest enemy. Finally, embrace eternal recurrence. Nietzsche asks us to imagine living our exact lives again and again for eternity. We should therefore live in such a way that we would willingly choose to experience the same life forever. What makes these ideas remarkable is that they came from someone who endured so much suffering. Nietzsche could easily have responded to life with hatred and bitterness. Instead, he transformed much of his pain into a philosophy of strength, authenticity, and appreciation for life. Unfortunately, few people understood him during his lifetime. His books were written in a poetic, dramatic style that made them powerful but difficult to interpret. Statements such as "God is dead" angered religious audiences, and many people dismissed him as dangerous or insane. Nietzsche also remained deeply lonely. Hoping to escape society, he traveled with his friends Paul and Lou Andreas Salome. They dreamed of creating an intellectual community together. But both Nietzsche and Rie developed feelings for Lou. Nietzsche proposed to her several times, and she rejected him each time. Their friendship collapsed, leaving Nietzsche heartbroken and even more isolated than before. In 1889, at the age of 44, Nietzsche suffered a complete mental breakdown in Turin, Italy. According to the famous story, he saw a coachman beating a horse, rushed toward it, wrapped his arms around its neck, and collapsed. He never recovered. For the rest of his life, he was largely unable to communicate or care for himself. Eventually, he came under the control of his sister Elizabeth, whom he strongly disliked. After Nietzsche became incapacitated, Elizabeth took charge of his writings. She edited, rearranged, and interpreted his unfinished work through the lens of her own nationalist and anti-Semitic beliefs. This helped create one of the greatest misunderstandings in the history of philosophy. The Nazis later adopted Nietzsche's term Übermensch and transformed it into the idea of a superior Aryan race. Adolf Hitler admired the version of Nietzsche promoted by Elizabeth and even visited her. But Nietzsche himself despised anti-Semitism, criticized nationalism, and rejected authoritarian systems that demanded obedience. His emphasis on individual freedom and self-created values was fundamentally opposed to Nazi ideology. Nietzsche died in 1900 and was buried beside his father in Reckon. His reputation remained distorted for decades, but scholars eventually separated his philosophy from his sister's manipulation. Nietzsche died in 1900 and was buried beside his father in Reckon. His reputation remained distorted for decades, but scholars eventually separated his philosophy from his sister's manipulation. Today, Nietzsche is recognized as one of the most influential thinkers in modern history. His ideas about nihilism, individuality, suffering, and the creation of meaning remain deeply relevant in an increasingly secular world. We now live, in many ways, in the world Nietzsche predicted, a world in which traditional authorities have weakened and individuals are expected to decide for themselves how to live. Whether this development is good or bad remains open to debate. But two things are clear: Nietzsche was far ahead of his time, and even he could not escape the crushing weight of the reality he spent his life examining. As he famously warned, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you.